Hey, Ron, will you let me know once we're ready? Thank you. Okay. Ryan, we're live. We're still 9:59 or something, but, oh, 9:55, yeah. My computer has 9:59, I have 9:55, and my phone has 9:57.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and call the first, I guess, ever virtual committee meeting to order. It is, I don't even know what day it is. Every day is a Wednesday, seems to me. But it's Wednesday, it's 10 o'clock, May 13th. All committee members are present. I'd like to acknowledge that the press and public had been duly notified of this meeting, and comments from the public were made available on the city's website, and those will be made part of the record. The second item on the agenda is a previous month's approval of previous minutes, March 2nd. Good Lord.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Perfect. There's been a motion to approve by Councilman Ward, second by Councilman Pounds. All of those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we do have citizens' comments. They will be made part of the record. Desiree, are we just going to post those when we post the minutes of the meeting, or just so people will know?
Yes, so we will post them as part of the minute packet. For
Okay.
this meeting, we have not yet received any public comments.
Okay, perfect. Old business, we have update on the refurbishment of the 95-foot ladder truck. I don't know who's going to jump on that one, Chief or Desiree?
Chief Graham
Okay.
will give us an update.
I'll take that. The truck's on schedule. It's still in Florida. It is in pieces. The turntable has been removed, which is a large part of this job. It's actually, I'm looking at a picture of it right now on a flatbed, getting ready to be painted. They are on schedule. We should have it by the end of June. And with any luck, we'll take the pumper, drop it off, and pick up the ladder truck. But everything's on schedule. It's going well. They had found a few issues in the beginning that we were not anticipating. We knew something was wrong because the truck kept breaking down, but they fixed that early on, and everything's going well.
Perfect. Good. And so the whole COVID thing didn't actually slow them down. They're still on schedule then. They're still moving forward.
There's another story to that. So this schedule, but the unfortunate part, the new truck is not yet in service because they're not allowed to leave Florida to come here to do the training.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this truck's on schedule.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else have questions? Nope. Okay, moving on. Discussion of implementation of paid parking in the designated public beach parking zones. Now, we've talked about doing this for next season. I know trying to get some numbers together for enforcement mechanisms. Desiree, you want to touch on that?
Yes. Yes, I'll go ahead and give everybody a quick update on this. We discussed this back in our last meeting in March, and also discussed it during the budget workshop. And there seems to be interest and a consensus among council for the city to pursue implementing a paid parking system on Palm Boulevard and the other designated beach parking areas. We all know they're both sides of Palm, 21st through 40th, the land side of Palm Boulevard between 41st and 57th Avenue, and also the avenues between 3rd and 9th Avenue would also be included. Picking up where we left off, I reached out to SCDOT to follow up on our meeting where we had back in late January. Chief Cornett and the Chair Buchanan and I went and met with the SCDOT team and talked to them about the preliminary plan of how this would look like, and asked some feedback. And we had discussed how in the past they had been somewhat reluctant at approving such system, but now they are easing some of those restrictions and requirements when it comes to the condition of the shoulders of the roads, which makes it more tenable for the city to pursue such system. So we reached out to them this week, and I'm waiting for a reply back, basically asking them whether or not the city would need a modified encroachment permit. We currently have one that's approved as part of the existing beach managed parking plan. We have to get an encroachment permit for the installation of those signs. Moving to a paid parking system would require changing some of the signage to indicate that those areas are paid parking. We don't believe that we would need a new permit, maybe just a modified permit, but waiting on their response. I also indicated that it would be the city's intent to implement this system for next season as soon as possible. So, making sure that they know in terms of timeline what our expectations are, and that the plan would be a pay by app only on these areas. This would eliminate the need for the city to install kiosks like the ones that we have on Front Beach and in the municipal parking lots. It would avoid that, having to install that in the right of way. That would be a very complicated. It would require significant investment, and there are just some complications with the location and having these kiosks functioning in these areas. So it would be a pay by app only. Those folks that don't own a smartphone or don't want to use a phone to pay to park in those areas could go to Front Beach and use one of the parkings, park there and use one of the parking kiosks. So it would not hinder any public access, it would not hinder any public parking for citizens who want to come to the beach, because we would be offering that flexibility somewhere else. Also shared with them that it's the city's intent that the annual residential parking decals that is distributed and to residents who show proof of residency. We all know we have this process by which people need to prove residency and vehicle registration to get an annual pass parking decal, and that it would be the city's intent to for those residents that live on the island that have that proper decal to be able to park in those places at no cost. We don't have a whole lot of residents that do that, only those that live adjacent to these parking areas. And since those decals are purchased with general fund revenue, which comes directly from property taxes, then it would be that would be the way that we would handle residential parking in these areas. Also reached out to Stantec and asked for a proposal for them to update the parking plan. As you all know, the actual map that designates all these areas is included as part of the ordinance. So it would require updating that. We don't think that it's going to be very costly, I think it'll be very negligible, because it's just a matter of updating the signs in that plan. And also, last thing, FY21 budget does include the funds for the purchase of 2 license plate readers, which would be required for the police department to enforce. And it would show who has paid to park and who has not. That's all I have in terms of an update on the paid parking system, unless you all have any questions.
No, that was thorough. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Ryan, real quick, and maybe it's for Ryan and Jimmy. I know, and I guess Desiree, in Budget Workshop 3, we talked about next year, but given our revenue challenges this year, we talked about potentially August of this year. Is that kind of off the table, or what's everybody's thinking around timing now?
I think we had discussed it, but I think just Chief was still trying to get prices on the LPRs and trying to get that information as well as waiting on some SCDOT information to come back to us as well. So I mean, even if it wasn't by August, I think we said it would be closer to October theoretically is by the time, but that's kind of the end of our beach season though.
Okay.
What I would say to that, Councilmember Pounds, is we'd have to, unless it's approved as an unbudgeted expenditure for FY20, then we'd have to wait until we get to FY21, which would start July 1st, to be able to purchase the license plate readers. And I don't know, maybe Chief Cornett can speak on the turnaround on ordering those. We'd have to look and see, because it passes that, it goes over the $25,000 threshold that would require us to go out for bid. It may be that that's the only company that can interact with our software. So we could, we'd have to look at those things, but certainly, my approach to SCDOT is there is a desire to implement this as soon as possible. whether it's October, or January or August. I really, there's some other moving parts that would need to fall into place before we can move forward.
And I would assume not only the turnaround time on the purchase from July 1 to get the LPRs, but I assume that the training on that and installation of that would be somewhat extensive as well, Chief.
Yes, the implementation would take several months from the time of going through the purchase process. It is only one LPR company that works with our system, but even that, we still would have to order two. We'd still have to get them installed. We'd still have to train our staff on them. I think that's going to take several months for that to actually come to fruition and do it the correct way.
And also, I would say, if I may, Chair, the education piece for the community. I think that will be key because it will be a significant shift from the way that parking has been handled. So we'd have to pay some attention to that.
Perfect. Any other questions? Good. We'll be discussing this more in some of the budget session as well. We have update on the public safety building rehabilitation. It's moving along. It's looking good. They're just starting to wrap around the front side of that thing now.
Yes, the project is moving along very well. We have weekly conference calls with the design build team and our owner's representative every Thursday. So we'll have this week's tomorrow at 1. I'll give you a quick update. So from the interior, drywall is pretty much complete on the second floor. For the fire department, the HVAC ducts for the second floor of the police department is being installed. For the exterior demo, it's pretty much complete and all the siding has been removed and they've started, if you all drive around, you'll see some of the siding being installed as we speak. We have, there's been a significant amount of work in the Sally Port as well. Let me see. This is very technical, so I don't want to bore you all with some of this work. So the roofing, I think it's one of the bigger components of this whole project, and they're installing some of the new roof panels that are on site. They're waiting on the waterproofing work to be completed so that activity on the roof can continue. Painting, we have some mock-ups outside for different types of painting, different colors for to choose from. I have not yet seen it, so I'm eager to look at some of the colors that Chief Graham has picked for the building. HVAC equipment has been ordered. There was a slight delay due to the COVID-19, but we think that we're going to get that on schedule. All the new light fixtures have been ordered. And we have started coordinating the move of the fire department from the 3rd floor. As you all know, the work was slated to start on the 3rd floor, and due to the pandemic situation, we delayed that so that our fire department crews could stay in the 3rd floor instead of the trailers. And I'll let Chief Graham talk about some of the things that we're going to be implementing to mitigate some of the concerns with having the fire department in the trailers, which are close quarters compared to where they are right now. And that is slated to happen by the end of this month so that they can start, the design build team can start construction on the 3rd floor of the fire department. Chief, did I miss anything else worth noting?
In reference to the move into the trailer, it's going to take place by May 30th. We have ordered 2 UV light systems that are fairly inexpensive and safe to be around. Some of them you have to leave the premises while they're running. These you do not. So for the bedrooms where there will be 2 people sleeping, there will be 1 unit in each of those 2 bedrooms. The beds have already been put in. Some of the mattresses are already in. We've already had the furniture cleaned. It has not gone back to the 2nd floor. So the bulk of what needs to be moved has already been moved. So what they're really doing is living in on the 3rd floor with different type of material. They don't have their cushy recliners that they bought. They're sitting in just regular old chairs, but we don't have to move some of the heavy things, such as the giant dining table that was made with some fire hydrants and really heavy duty wood. So it's not going to take much at all to finish the move from the third floor to the trailer.
And going back to the construction project, we're still on budget, we're still on schedule. Most of the demo has been completed so far, and this is when we were concerned that when we start peeling back the onion, some of the things were going to be discovered, and that has not happened. You know, I'm very glad, and you know, the design build team was very thorough in their inspections and their the work that they did previously to identify the deficiencies with the building. So there have been some things here and there, nothing major, nothing unusual for a construction project. So we're glad that everything's moving as it should, and everybody, we keep in constant communication all the time, and Chief Graham and Chief Cornett have also been instrumental at keeping up with some of the work that's happening over there. So we're hopeful that we're going to be done on schedule. I know that we all had some concerns about the COVID-19 creating some issues. They have implemented a very thorough plan to ensure that the folks that come into the building to work are screened every day, and have been very proactive in ensuring that our staff is protected, and there's little to no interaction between our folks and the construction team.
Okay. I know at one point during this construction phase, Desiree and I talked to you about this, that we had an option phase for the front porch or the front portico area. And I think just because the way things were going, I mean, the way things are going now, the way the budget process going through, and that was the option we were going to bring it back up at a certain time, was to vote on this and whether or not to move forward with it. I know it's going to be an extra almost $200,000, improvement to the building. I think it's something that we could do without at this time, just based on what we have going on. And you don't need a motion from us coming out of that, do you?
Not yet. We have not yet received from the design build team when the deadline is for the city to make that decision. They initially thought it would be within 3 or 4 months of construction starting. I'll ask them tomorrow if that timeline still stands. But yes,
Okay.
when it comes time to making that decision, it'll be up to council to decide whether we wanted to consider changing the portico as a change order.
Okay.
You are right; it would be a $200,000, almost a $200,000 expense.
Okay, that's fine. Any other questions, the chief? Or okay, moving on. Discussion of recommendations from Planning Commission related to short-term rental regulations.
So I asked Douglas to join us for this discussion here. Again, picking up where we left off back in March, back before all this craziness started happening, we presented to you all some of the recommendations that came out of Planning Commission. They worked they worked on this issue as requested by the Real Property Committee last year, and they did quite a bit of work on it, met with some of the short-term rental companies, and came back with a series of recommendations, some of them that were implemented from the operational perspective, from the police department, and others that would require enacting an ordinance. And I'll just to refresh everybody's memory, I'll just ask Douglas to go through what those recommendations were, and then we can talk about next steps of bringing this before full council, or if the committee wants us to do a little bit more research into any of these recommendations, and kind of facilitate that discussion with you all.
Douglas?
Yes, so I went through a little bit of the Planning Commission's kind of the entirety of the work that they did to come to these recommendations. I can answer any questions about all of the options they looked at, but I'll just focus on, I'll be quiet on that today and just focus on their specific recommendations. And as Desiree mentioned, these were These were made in conjunction with working with the rental companies as well as Chief Cornett and the police department in terms of what we thought we would get the best kind of the best bang for our effort, I guess I would say. And there's really three fairly major changes. The first one is, excuse me, a reduction in the daytime occupancy for a lot of rentals. As you all will recall, there is what I would call a stepped overnight occupancy that's based on the size of the rental unit. But historically, there has been a flat daytime occupancy set at 40 people. The example was brought up that, in a C cabin that's 500 square feet, you could legally have 40 people in there and not run afoul of any short-term rental requirements. So the first one is to make the daytime occupancy a relation of twice the overnight occupancy. So if your C cabin, for example, they have a overnight occupancy of 6, this would make their daytime occupancy limit be 12. There is a provision in there that once you get to 40, the old max, you wouldn't be allowed to go any higher than that. So theoretically, if you had an overnight occupancy of 25, you don't get twice that at 50. You then fall to the old cap of 40. That's the first change. The second change is in what constitutes or what would trigger the suspension and potentially the revocation of the rental license. This has never been really clear in the code, but historically the city has used 3 convictions within a year would start the rental license suspension and revocation process. We found that trigger had only been met once since the beginning of this program, and that was really an owner who just did absolutely nothing to try to control their renters. So and in talking with the police department, they felt like that trigger really was pretty unrealistic, that there would be 3 convictions in a year, and it's quite difficult to kind of control if and when that might happen. So this recommendation is that trigger be changed to 5 founded complaints. Obviously, founded complaint is a much easier threshold to meet than a conviction, which is the reason why the number is being pushed up from 3 to 5. So that will be a major change. We still don't think that there will be a large number of rental properties meeting that threshold. The Planning Commission looked at the data. There will be, there would have been some that would have been very close in the last couple of years, but it still has to be deemed a founded complaint. So I know there's nervousness about a complaining neighbor showing up or calling every other day, but still, this provision puts the discretion in the officer's hands in terms of what is founded. So it would have to be 5 actual unlawful activities that the police department witnesses before we would start that revocation process. That's also a big change. Another problem that we wanted to address was the issue of the police department being called out and not having anybody respond for the owner. They've had this happen where they get a call, they show up, they are somewhat limited in what they can do without an owner or a property manager or an owner's representative present. So to help them in those situations, this recommendation would add the requirement that an owner's representative would have to be physically on site within 1 hour of receiving a call. So every manager or owner would have to make arrangements to have somebody that could be physically present to help in a situation where violations are occurring and the police department needs somebody to respond. This would put the onus on those owners and managers to get somebody that could respond. And then finally, the kind of minor changes to how rentals are advertised. This comes from the city of Charleston, that would make it a violation to even advertise a rental without a license. That this would simplify our enforcement. Right now, technically it's not a violation to advertise. It would only be a violation when somebody's actually rented something. So that puts the onus on us to try to find proof that a unit was rented, where this could simplify matters and make it a requirement to even advertise it. You have to have a license. This will also simplify. We're working with host compliance. That's really what they're looking for. They're looking for advertisings. So it'll make that process a little simpler. And then finally, we thought it would be a good idea to make the advertisements include the license number, just for our ability to be able to match the listings online with our database in our office and be able to verify which have licenses and which license it is. So that is a summary of their recommendations. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody? Philip?
Yeah. Hey, Douglas, real quick, because I was looking back at your chart that you'd given us a couple of months ago. Two things. Everything you just ran through would require an ordinance. Is that why you were highlighting those?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the 5 founded complaints, I couldn't remember where we wound up on the planning commission. Is that in the course of a calendar year or life of a rental property? I couldn't remember.
No, that's within the course of the calendar year.
Got it. Thank you.
Jimmy, you got anything? Up, you're
Running
muted.
his leaf blower the whole meeting, and I caught like the last 2 sentences of the presentation. So I'll catch up with Desiree later on.
Okay.
But I'm here now. I can hear
Okay, perfect.
It was riveting, Jimmy.
I
I'm
haven't
sorry.
heard anything.
That's funny. So I have, thanks Douglas for doing that. I have a question though with the 5 founded complaints. We're taking out our, we're kind of disrupting our 3 branches of government, and we don't have, there's no due process for somebody who would be able to go through, and that may be something we have to check with our legal counsel. But if it just a complaint was lodged and now the judge and jury falls on the officer and not the court systems in case something went wrong. So that there in itself could be problematic, and I don't know how we'd have to do that. And that's a Julia question. Just the form of due process for convictions.
And I would just remind you that that the 5 founded complaints begins the process of revocation, but revocation will take an entire process through city council whereby they will be allowed to, they can present their case, they can be represented by a lawyer, they can, which they typically would do. They will make their case that to you all, and the ordinance specifically states that business license revocation is a matter that's held by council, not the courts. So, and Julia, we've talked to Julia. I mean, it wouldn't hurt for council to hear that same input.
Correct. Okay. Thank you, Douglas. Yes. I guess based on the fact previously it was found on, founded, or I guess on legal opinion. So, but yeah, I'm aware that council does all legal or does all revocations. And then for the last one, why would we only limit the, and I'm not saying we should do it for all of them, but you're taking one class of business license and having them put other business license numbers on an ad. Is that all print ads? Is it all internet ads? Would it be the business license of the rental company, or if each property has its own business license? I mean, how would that be listed? It just seems cumbersome. And
So this is also taken from the city of Charleston, and the idea here is that that each rental unit would have the rental license number for each unit displayed. So it wouldn't be the manager's license. It would be the specific rental unit. I can tell you quite honestly, I had a little bit of, this was, the majority of the planning commission went with this. I don't know that I fully understood the benefit, because if they're, I guess it would make those stand out that are trying to fly under the radar. I think at the end of the day, that was what it was getting at. But in my mind, if they put a random number up there, it would.
Right.
I don't know that it gives us a tremendous amount of leverage. So if there's that one, to me, is not as critical as the rest. So if there's heartache with that, I don't know that it would matter if we remove that, quite frankly.
Okay, I just know it's cumbersome, and just like you said, it can be, anybody could throw a set of numbers up there or try to find something else up there to put. And I think one of the biggest, I didn't mean to interrupt, but one of the biggest things we found out with the restrictions to the island wasn't with the rental companies that were having problems trying to skirt the business license. It was a lot of other folks that were coming onto the island that the licensing department was able to capture as well. So I mean,
a concern that was brought up by the rental agencies is and it depends on the hosting site, but they have a difficult time trying to put numbers up in their advertisements.
okay.
That the, VRBO, I don't know which ones do it, but they basically will kick back any numbers because they think it's an attempt of the agent to try to circumvent the hosting software, to
Correct.
say, hey, call me, I'm going to use VRBO, but call me directly. So they do have a lot of problems in hosting numbers. So they express that concern. City of Charleston has indicated that it hasn't been a problem for them. So we put it in there. So, if that's one that council's uncomfortable with, I don't think it would be too terrible to eliminate that one.
Okay. Anybody else on this? Do we need a motion on this right now, or being how Jimmy kind of missed part of it, I'd like for him to hear an update on what Douglas had given as well.
Sure. The action that the committee could take if it was the consensus of the group is to make a motion to recommend present these recommendations back to council in the form of an ordinance. It would be presented to council for first reading later this month, if it is the will of the committee. But if no action is required unless you all want to.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's fine. I'd like to continue to get some legal counsel out of that as well, and then we can move it forward. I don't think it's a pressing issue now that we're into. This wouldn't take effect until probably. Well, I don't know. When would be the date would be? When would you be looking for this to go active?
That would be up to you all.
Okay. Yeah.
I do have
Okay.
one question, Chair. Just
Yes.
for clarity for the record. During the Planning Commission, when the Planning Commission was discussing this, there was a lot of conversation about why do we need to have a designated person present in order for the police department to be able to respond to certain situations. So for the benefit of the group and the benefit of the public, I'd like for Chief Cornack to explain or
Mhm.
maybe give an example of a situation when they're called to respond to an incident and are not able to maybe ask people to leave the house. So if Chief Cornett, if you may clarify and a situation that would explain that.
Certainly. So
Thanks.
if we had a rental property that had a large crowd and it was a party and it was just an ongoing nuisance, we do not have the ability to make people leave because they've paid for it. It falls under the same rights for violation of search and seizure and private property rights as it would if you rented a hotel room or anything like that. However, the people who own the property do have the authority to come on and ask them all to leave, and we would be there with them. We can't do it without them being present there with us, and it would need to be somebody that either is the owner or has documentation stating that they legally have the authority to have people leave the property and place them on trespass notice. We just simply can't do it without them.
So the intention would be for the business license to include some contact information of either a short-term rental management company or a person that would have the authority to act on behalf of the property owner when a situation like that arises.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Hey, Ryan, real quick. So
Yep.
Desiree and Douglas, I guess this ordinance is written, right? So to your point, Ryan, I don't know that there's urgency, around moving quickly because I'm where you are on the advertising piece. That seems like that's based on the feedback from the rental community. That was the most cumbersome piece of anything that we're looking to enact. And Douglas, there wasn't an effective date on the draft ordinance, I don't think, right? That'd be up to whenever council got to it and
That's correct. Yeah, I
Vote to
mean,
approve it.
typically these things become effective as soon as they're enacted unless the ordinance says something else, which you could.
got it.
I think
Yeah.
that the draft ordinance does say, would it take effect and be in full force immediately, but certainly council could amend that. This is just a red line and, either January 1st or whatever date council decides.
Okay,
So Ryan, I mean, I'm glad to make a motion. If we want to wait, that's fine too. I'm with
that's,
you.
yeah, that's
Urgency.
fine. No, I don't think there is. And I don't think, even if we were to, if it would enact it now, I mean, I don't know how the non-compliance issues would be for this beach season already are rented. But yeah, we'll get some questions answered. We'll bring it up next month, Dave.
So we'll keep it on the agenda for public safety for next month.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Moving forward, discussion of pedestrian crosswalk at Palm and Isle of Palms connector. We're trying to get some updates. This is about the whole pushing the button, freezing the lights, and trying to reach out to DOT or the engineering to see if actually we can just, I think the last where we left it was just pause, extend that left turn signal stoplight a little bit longer.
Right. And so that would be the same delay that they would kind of give is the answer that we've gotten from them. It's going to be the same 41 second delay regardless. If we institute the walk or we delay the turn. And, even the one issue that was brought up from council that I think we should look at trying to find a resolution for too is even if we stop the left-hand turn coming from Palm onto the connector, we still have that right-hand turn that has a yield. And so that would still be the other issue. And I think what I'm looking for is as we pick up our progression, I can study this a little bit more when we are a little bit busier and we have more people. And I think maybe I could come back to you with a better solution, understanding the significant impact that a 41 second delay would have when all traffic is stopped. So maybe we look at that and see what we could do differently from that approach. And if I can have a little time to study it when we're busy and have people walking through there.
Perfect. I think that'll be fine. Any other questions for the chief? Moving on to new business, it would be discussion of parking and traffic complaints on 7th Avenue. Where are we at here? Where was this? This is Desiree?
Yes, this was a resident on 7th Avenue that emailed the mayor, and the mayor, I think, shared that with you, asking for this to be on the agenda. if I recall correctly, there's a resident there that owns 2 adjacent lots. And he believes that there is an uneven number, I guess, of public parking on 7th Avenue compared to other avenues. I met with him about, a year ago, and he had expressed some concerns about the width of the right of way in that area. And people were pulling in, and the vehicles weren't, in fact, encroaching in his property. We explained to him that one of the changes that were approved last year and implemented this year was requiring parallel parking on all public beach parking areas, including the avenues. So we thought that that was a way to mitigate some of those issues of front end parking. He believes and claims that because there are more parking spaces available on 7th Avenue, that makes the traffic in that avenue heavier. So we, put him in touch with Chief Cornett. Chief Cornett has been in contact with him as well about maybe increasing patrolling in that area and enforcing some of the parking violations there. He has also complained about people using his driveway to turn. And, unfortunately, unless we have a police officer at the time when that happens, I'm not sure there's a whole lot we could do after the fact. But, I think that is the, the nature of those, of that complaint and those concerns about traffic and parking. Parking is available on both sides of the road on 3rd, 4th, 7th, and 6th.
6. And
then 5th, 8th, and 9th, it's only on one side of the road. And I think that's been the case historically in years ago, I think before I was born. That area was not very stable. So the city would change the parking from one side of the road to another to allow for the other side to get compacted again and stabilize after being used. I don't think that is the case anymore. I think it's pretty stable on both sides, but it's stayed like that historically. And I think that he has some concerns about why there's parking on both sides of the road on some streets and not others. So I've kind of explained that to him, that is the reason why. It's just a historical use of the way that the parking is organized there.
Right.
So I don't know, Chief, if you have anything to add to that.
Not really. The email he sent did include pictures, and I was able to tell him that when I got out there that same day, I was looking for violations, but somebody beat me to it and had already written a significant number of citations in the area, to include the ones that he photographed. Must have been shortly after he sent the email. I don't know, but the traffic on that road is really no different than the traffic on the other roads that have parking on both sides. And those roads are a little bit smaller and skinnier, and so it feels tight there. But vehicles can safely pass through there. The fire truck could come through there if they needed to. But it is a little bit, it feels a little more claustrophobic when you go down those roads because you have cars on both sides.
There was also a request made by him in one of his communications about installing a stop sign in that avenue. And that's really managed by SADOT. And there's currently a stop sign on Ocean between 7th and Ocean in that intersection. So I can't speak to how SADOT assesses and makes recommendations and implements the stop parking signs there, but it would be an SADOT thing whether or not they think it's warranted, moving it from Ocean to the avenue.
Okay. I actually met with somebody had called me about almost with the same complaint or concern. And I met with somebody from 601 Ocean yesterday in that property. And they actually had DOT came out and spoke with them later on that afternoon and saw where they were having some issues. And And they wrote me back and said DOT was actually moving the no parking, was going to move the no parking sign.
Mhm,
And I said, well, we need to make sure that we're aware of it. So we know where it's at in our map, in our
mhm,
signage. But they were going to move the no parking sign up the street for them a little bit further. And they were going to allow them to go ahead and, mark off almost like what we do with the chalking with the Palm
mhm.
Boulevard. Was they were just going to, DOT said, yeah, you can just kind of delineate a parking spot and you could try to organize the parking there to kind of stop, because it's a big area and people were not parallel parking, but they were pulling straight in.
Mhm.
So, but it was interesting. But the way DOT did come out and help and work with those folks as well. So,
Yeah.
but-
And we'll make sure that we communicate that to Mr. Baloney. We have in the past, but we'll facilitate any resources that he may need to make sure that he reaches out to the right person at SCDOT who could come in
Perfect.
and take a look at that.
okay. Let me pull up my agenda again. Any other questions? This got put on here, discussion of regulations for dogs on the beach and update on number of violators and concerns. This is the biggest thing that we deal with out here in the island, is dogs and parking. And this is brought on because there was a resident that was bitten by a dog off leash in a time when the dogs were not supposed to be off leash. And they just wanted us to evaluate our leash laws, look at other communities, what they have. And I'd like to have Chief give us an update on some of that information as well. But if he's noticed number of dogs off, and I've seen it as well, but number of people with dogs off leash during those times, and what we can do to help increase enforcement on that.
So I pulled the stats so that you would have them. In 2019, we wrote 9 dog at large, basically leash law violations, and 1 warning for it. So far this year, we've written 2 citations for it. I'll be the first to say that when the checkpoint was going on and as we've been adjusting to the COVID, I think we did we shift our focus to those things. And we have since, as we've started the reopening, put a heavier focus on the animal at large. And I know this morning I heard the animal control officer stop at least 3 people and issue citations. So he's out there, and we've communicated to the staff that we need to make sure we're a little more proactive in this area to address it. We do have people that violate it. I was happy to say that yesterday before our department head meeting, I hit the beach myself to look, and every dog I saw was on leash. So either the word got out or I just got lucky. But there definitely were a lot of violators in the beginning, and I think we're going to have a more aggressive approach to addressing those violations. And my hope is that word will spread, and we will see a decline in the number of people that are breaking that violation or committing that violation.
Perfect. And I think the biggest part of it was the fact we had a lot of our officers at the checkpoints during this last, month, and not necessarily on the beach when there wasn't a whole lot of activity. Yes, I'd love to increase enforcement, so changing laws, but Desiree, I'd like to do some type of community outreach as well. And just, I don't want to say pull the community, but just say, maybe the city's perhaps changing or looking at various leash laws, what have you, and just see and just put out Folly Beaches, put out Sullivan's Island, see what theirs are like, just kind of see what the gauge of the community, and put our finger on the pulse of them and see what they may think. If the rest of the folks think they need to be more aggressive, or they're fine with what it is right now. So we're just fine with what it is right now and just increased enforcement. So.
And we have back maybe a year or 2 ago, when there was quite a lot of discussion around dog leashes and the hours and the regulations. We pulled all that information, so we pulled a lot of information from our neighboring communities, other beach communities, and we can certainly provide that to the committee and have further discussion next month. And yeah, I mean, we get these complaints all the time. I see Councilmember Ward smiling, because I think that in the past, whenever the dog conversation comes up, we get, it's a very emotional discussion here.
Don't mess with the dogs.
Yeah.
Just don't mess.
No.
I'm all for stricter enforcement, and the incident that happened last month was terrible, and really not happy it happened, but I'm just for Well,
enforcement.
Brian, you've been messing around with stuff long line. I have.
Yeah.
Anytime you start
I said-
talking about the dogs, you get everybody all upset.
Yeah, I said it's,
So I'm
there-
just for stricter enforcement, and I trust the chief to carry out our current ordinances and everything's
could
just
do-
fine. Before you put too much work into it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we could do, the police department have done a wonderful job at social, using social media for, outreach and education to the community. And
Mhm.
I can see a quick video just showing people, and reminding folks what the hours are and what the proper dog etiquette is. It's not only
Perfect.
having them on a leash, but, picking up their poop and cleaning after them and just doing the right thing. So I think that we could certainly get something like that set up before the full season begins.
Okay,
I think that's a great idea.
perfect.
I think
Thank you.
you're in my brain. That's what I was writing down when you started saying it. So
Perfect. Okay, let's move on then. Discussion of governor's social distancing guidelines for restaurants. I guess they're really just guidelines. It says for restaurants and enforcement, but it's basically restaurants,
Mhm.
beaches, wherever there is no.
Yeah, and I can go quickly explain, the 2 executive orders that granted restaurants the ability to offer outdoor and indoor dining. So outdoor dining was allowed by virtue of the governor's executive order 2020-31. And I think Chief Cornett did mention, the language from the executive order really binds our hands in terms of enforcement, because the language from the order for both outdoor dining services, which were allowed as of Monday, May 4th, it says restaurants that elect to provide outdoor customer dining services should consider and incorporate industry guidelines regarding outdoor seating, such as those prepared by the Restaurant and Lodging Association of South Carolina. So in terms of our ability to enforce, unless City Council passes a local emergency ordinance making the implementation of these guidelines as a requirement, then our position really is just facilitating and making sure that these restaurants have the ability, know what these guidelines are, explain those guidelines to them. And to that end, I know Chief Cornett has visited all of these restaurants and, to make sure that they understand what they should be doing, following best practices. I also asked, I know police department has a lot going on, so I asked Chief Graham and her team, particularly the fire inspector, to do the same and pay them a visit and make sure that they can provide all that documentation, explain what that means, and make out how they could better ensure that there's social distancing happening within their establishments. We are also working with MUSC and trying to coordinate a presentation of their Back to Business program, where they come in to different establishments. We're actually going to do it for the city in the recreation center, but it's a service that it's available, and they come in, they evaluate their practices, they evaluate, their cleaning products and, the plan that they have put together, and prepare a toolkit of resources. And, it's an effort to make the CDC guidelines be a little bit more specific to their situation and their location and their restaurant. So we will share the time and Zoom information with our brick and mortar businesses and rental companies, so that they can also join and know that this is a service that's available to them. It's very low cost, paying off their hourly rate, and there may be opportunities for the city to help them cover those costs as well. But yeah, we prepared a page on the website with a ton of resources for businesses. And we have been constantly sharing those by email with our email list, and reaching out to them and offering assistance in any way we can.
Okay. And I know that I think a lot of them were kind of taken by surprise, but were able to, they were inundated and didn't have the staffing there to help with the distancing, the required distancing. And So I know I've talked to a number of restaurants and they're taking, stepping up their measures to block off, doing single entrance areas to their restaurants and their bars and what have you, and try to control the flow in and out of those establishments from now on. So, yeah. Philip?
Hey, Ryan, real quick. Desiree, did I see City of Charleston, I think, kick the can down the road a few more days on addressing the same topic? And did I read that right? That they decided not to do anything yet?
I'm not sure I can
Okay,
answer
that's
that
all right.
question. I
Yeah,
don't,
that's okay. I just saw it, I think, yesterday or today, that I think their council voted to not enact anything other than what the governors
Okay.
got out there.
oh,
Anything
yes,
more?
yes, yeah, I don't know any of our neighbors that have gone above and above what the governor has done, which is just making suggestions. I think everybody's sort of waiting to see if people do the right thing, if it becomes a problem before, legislating that. So, the guidelines for reopening the hospitality industry are very thorough, and they have, tips on training employees, tips on, food safety, takeout safety. So it's pretty thorough, and we're making sure that they all have access to that. But it is tough. I mean, I think for everybody trying to navigate this whole new realm of this whole new world.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, as long as we can make that information as readily available to them as quick as possible. And like I said, on our city website, it makes it super easy for them to access it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we've
Yeah, and
been
I guess-
emailing it to them too, and handing them over, Chief Cornett and a fire inspector have also been taking those copies with them and kind of walking them through, make sure that they, understand.
And sorry, Chief, go ahead. Chief Graham.
Chief Graham? You're muted.
So in addition to handing out the flyers, not flyers, but the packets of the 2 different orders and the guidelines from the Restaurant Association, we also had offered each restaurant for us to put up a temporary placard to reduce the occupancy by 50%. It's not a law that they have, we can't enforce it. So we said, this may help you if you have space available and someone wants in, you can use this to your advantage. And most of them welcome that.
Perfect. Thanks, Chief. Philip?
Ryan, just real quick to your point, this first full weekend, if you will, who knew if 2 people or 200 people were going to show up, essentially. And I'm kind of where you are. If staffing wasn't quite back to where it needed to be yet at these restaurants, I think we give them a chance to react to what happened the first weekend. I mean, we're going to meet again in 2 or 3 weeks. We can just keep it out there and see what we see for the next couple of weeks, I guess.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Philip. Anybody else? Perfect. Let's move on to our reports. Chief Graham.
All righty. So in March, I've got 2 short reports for you. In March, we had a total of 54 calls. 34 of those were resident and 20 were non-resident. 17 of those were EMS and a total of 15 were in Wild Dunes. The new truck did arrive on the 4th. However, because of the COVID, it has not been placed in service. The equipment has been mounted, it's ready to go. But until we can have a factory rep, the factory, the person who sells the truck can do the training on a pumper, but they cannot do the training on an aerial. So we're waiting for the people to come from Florida. The construction began on the 23rd of the public safety building. We did have 4 water rescues in the month of March. For April, we had a total of 44 calls. 31 were resident, 13 were non-resident, 18 were EMS type calls, and 7 calls overall were in Wild Dunes. There were 5 water rescue calls. We did have a fuel spill at the Circle K, which was fairly significant. We assisted Sullivan's Island with 2 separate structure fires. We also had a dumpster fire up against a structure. Everything was okay there. We had another structure fire that involved a dryer that overheated. And this would technically be for next month, but I'm so excited. I can't wait till next month to let y'all know this. On May 3rd, firefighter Puck Harbor and firefighter Sezganoff were on the beach on the ATV. They had no jet ski. They had no specific equipment. They just happened to be patrolling, looking at the crowds. While on the beach, we received a 911 call for a person in distress at Breach Inlet. They swiftly went down to Breach Inlet without any special gear, but for life jackets. Firefighter Puck Harbor and firefighter Sezganoff put on their life jackets, grabbed a rescue tube and a bag, throw bag. Puck Harbor swam out to the person in distress who was yelling and screaming for help. And right behind him was Sezganoff with a throw bag. Puck Harbor made it to the swimmer, gave him a rescue tube. As Sezganoff was approaching the victim in the water, he believes he encountered a shark. He said he kicked it out of the way and threw the rope back to Puck Harbor, and they pulled the man to safety. That in itself deserves an award. They will be presented with an award as soon as they come in, but it sounded like very much above and beyond the call of duty. There was no jet ski, there was no assistance. It was just those two. Had they not acted, then they probably would have died.
Wow. Perfect.
Yep.
That's good
Wanted
news.
to share. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Chief.
Any questions?
No, that's it. Chief Cornett?
I don't have any heroic stories, but that is a very good. Very proud of those two. That's phenomenal work.
Yes. Well, working the checkpoint for the last how many days was pretty heroic. Let me tell you that.
They've done a lot, and the guys have they've worked really hard. You have our April stats in front of you, but I figured I'd take a moment to kind of talk about the stats that came from checkpoint operation and the reopening operation that's currently in effect, because they're not necessarily outlined in there in the way I'm going to break them down. For the checkpoint operation, we gave 64 warnings during the beach access path closing. We gave 27 social distancing warning, 27 warnings for stay at home. 37 warnings. We issued 3 citations for social distancing violations and 4 citations for violating the stay at home order. We gave 598 warnings for the keep moving, 1 citation for short-term rental violation, 3 citations for checkpoint violations. And that was for the checkpoint. Since the checkpoint has been down on the beaches with the operation that we're calling reopening, we've issued 478 parking tickets, 1 noise ordinance ticket, 10 alcohol violation tickets, 3 tickets for possession of marijuana, 4 for possession of beer by a minor, 1 for possession of liquor by a minor, 1 for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 8 traffic violations, and 1 fake ID citation, and several warnings were issued as well. So that the guys have been working very hard. I'm very proud of our staff. They have stepped up in every way that we have asked them to do so, and they have done it without complaining, and got out there and worked really hard for us. I'm really proud of them.
We all are, Chief. They all did a good job. Both departments, and actually the whole city in itself, they did a great job. And we're trying to work together during this, last month or so. So I appreciate it. The Chief and I had forwarded you an email from a citizen wanting some numbers and stuff. And Desiree, I think you were copied on it, or I sent it to Desiree and copied the Chief. If we could just make sure those numbers are, and I know they're in here, but as part of the record as well, or make that it's readily available.
Absolutely.
For them. Okay. Any other questions for the chiefs, either chief or the administrator?
Hey, real quick, Ryan, sorry. Hey, Chief Graham, why do we break out Wild Dunes separately? Just historical data to have, or?
Years ago, it was asked. There had been
Yeah, I'm just
discussion
curious.
many years ago. Many years ago, there was discussion about putting a Station 3. That really has nothing to do with the numbers, but that was a discussion years ago. And we were asked, if y'all don't want it, I can take it away. But
Yeah, just curiosity question for me, being the newbie. Thank you.
Call me later.
Got it. Okay. Any other discussion?
I do have one more thing I forgot to put in my report, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
We had, if you've watched the news, there've been a lot of departments that have been utilizing the drones to help with social distancing. And we have come across, we did a trial with one out here in the parking lot, and we could see the beach. We could actually see how far people were apart. We were able to see the traffic backed up all the way across the connector. Very useful tool for us, not only for COVID-19, but even during the summer when we have a missing child or something like that, we could put that drone up and have an eye in the sky, and even have many of them now come with FLIR so that you've got infrared if it's at night, and a PA system attached to it. So we could actually be flying around calling for the child or describing the child that was missing, which is a normal call we get. I bring it up to, first off, we've come across a Department of Justice grant that we could put in for, which is a 100% grant. There's no matching, which normally there's a 10% matching for that, but this one is 100%. But we would need blessing from council to move forward with that. And the other part is there is a company in California that's trying to get their name out into law enforcement. It's a little bit cheaper version of a drone, but they are willing to donate drones if we put in for them. I've submitted some questions to them to see if they would, what they were offering. But just two things to keep in mind that would be free for the city. And if we did it, we can do what's called a COA, which gives us the ability to certify one individual that can train all of the operators, and they can put it up whenever they need to use it for those events, if it's something council's interested in us moving forward.
And I have one thing to add.
Yes.
I mean, we have talked about, the benefit of having one of those devices with the city, not only for just regular, everything that Chief Cornett just explained, but also after hurricanes. We always have an assessment team come out and assess every single road, and this could assist in those efforts as well. Monitor the beach after a hurricane and look at the erosion, as well as down poles and all that. So it would have a year-round use, and it would benefit the city in multiple ways. So I just.
Okay, Chief, when do those grants and everything come due, or when do you?
So the DOJ grant would be something we would need to move on very quickly. It's time sensitive because it's COVID-19 related. And then obviously the company from California is wishing to donate. We'd have to move on that pretty quickly too, because once you give out so many, you realize you can start charging for it.
Right. Okay. It is. I'd like to see the policy behind it on how it's going to be used. I don't like the Big Brother concept of it. So, and I've kind of voiced my concerns on that as well. Is for, is an enforcement mechanism. I guess is an idea to figure out. I guess with finding children, it seems like a great concept, or even monitoring the connector, because I've always wanted real-time numbers and stuff like that to try to evaluate that. I'd really like to see some kind of policy in use for it, though.
Yeah, we can develop a draft policy for you all and for council to evaluate if that would, I mean, we would do it anyway, but we could do it ahead of time and make sure that everybody understands what the use would be. We can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy, you're unmuted. Oh, there you go. You're live now. Where's your question?
It sounds like to me that if we were to take advantage of these, one of these offers, we had to move fairly quickly. Do you have a timeline, Chief?
I don't. DOJ is basically first come, first serve type of thing. And other departments have already been able to move forward with getting that grant submitted. And then again, the company out of California, I don't know how long they're going to continue to supply them to agencies before they feel like they've got their name out there enough.
Desiree, I was wondering if you could put something together for the upcoming regular council meeting to where we could vote up or down on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can actually, the chair, we can ask Councilmember Pounds, we can also include it in Ways and Means, which is next Tuesday, maybe for more discussion with the full body. And we can have a draft by then. I'm looking at.
Well, that's fine, but if
Yeah.
it's a grant, I don't know why I have to go through Ways and Means. It's fine.
It's, I guess, I mean, whatever the group wants, it's just a quicker, the Ways and Means meets next Tuesday rather than 2 weeks. from
That's
now.
fine. That's fine. Not a big deal.
Okay. Perfect. I got a little more research I need to do on it. So before I act, but I think by then I should be able to gather all the information I need. Okay. Any other business or questions or next meeting date, I think is set for June, not 1st. Is that good with y'all? Or it's obvious, very literally the beginning of the month. So,
I'm good, Ryan, if you want to do it.
okay. Jimmy, you good with that?
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. Well, okay, June, that'd be at 9 o'clock. And I'll probably still be zooming at that time. So,
Mhm.
okay, there being nothing else, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So
Make a
moved.
motion.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Councilman Ward made a motion to adjourn, Pound seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you all. We'll see you all.
11:11.
Thank
Bye,
you.
have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Y'all too.